You're listening to The Creative Imposter, episode 118. Welcome to The Creative Imposter. I'm Andrea Klender. Are you ready for the winter holidays? What? How did it get to be that time already? Well, if you are feeling frustrated and homebound and worried about a dark, cold season at home, I have 2 more expansive episodes for you in our creative travel series. Today, I'm bringing you stories from overseas and some backyard travel advice, as well as entrepreneurial dreams come true from Debbie Arcangeles of the Offbeat Life. I found Debbie by doing some Instagram hashtag research. Late last summer, I was looking for travel influencers who didn't give me that fakey fake feeling, with an awesome story and bonus points if they had their own podcast. Debbie has it all in spades. I love how specific her niche is. Her show, The Offbeat Life, is about connecting with location-independent entrepreneurs and digital nomads. Debbie is also the founder of How to Create a Podcast.com. Seriously jealous of that URL. An all-in-one resource for learning how to launch and grow and monetize your show. She describes herself as an expert at turning hobbies into profitable businesses. And if this episode doesn't make you want to launch your own podcast or online business, or maybe both, I don't know what will. Speaking of podcasting and online business, there are 2 parts of my business that have really kept me going through this rotten year, and I know they will help carry me through the winter holidays. Podcasting and our new online community, the Creative Imposter Collective. So now I'd like to take just a moment to offer those 2 things to you so we can enjoy them together. My team has been working behind the scenes over the last few months to build a space online away from the prying eyes of Facebook, where we can celebrate our creative wins and safely vent our 2020 gripes, where we can share our creative works in process and showcase the results. More importantly, a space that, over time, facilitates friendships even when we can't be face-to-face in a room. The Creative Imposter Collective is now hosted on Mighty Networks. It's free to join, and honestly, I feel like it's a breath of fresh air every time I log in and see something a member has posted. Coming up soon, we'll even be hosting a Farewell 2020, that's the nice version of the name, you'll have to join to see the naughty version, virtual session. I know that date cannot come soon enough. To learn more and join, visit thecreativeimposter.com/community. And if you happen to also be a podcaster with at least 6 months of showmaking under your belt, who wants to reach for the stars with your show in 2021, if you're tired of feeling isolated as a show creator and you could use some support, some fresh ideas, a new approach, a sounding board for the thoughts rattling around in your head, the Podcast Envy Pro Pod is here for you. I'm accepting applications right now through December 5th, 2020 for the first ever cohort of the Pro Pod, which begins in 2021. You can learn more and apply or book a quick call with me to discuss at thecreativeimposter.com/podcast envy pro. This founding cohort will meet monthly via Zoom. Each session will spotlight one member with a question around their show for us to discuss. Every 6 months, you'll get a deep dive one-on-one coaching with me. The first one starts at the beginning of the program, so you can kick off 2021 with a plan. Membership includes other perks like show features on Podcast Envy, my other podcast, access to my craft and culture behind the scenes show, and an exclusive online hub on, you guessed it, Mighty Networks for quick questions and resources from the community. Links to both the Creative Imposter Collective and the Podcast Envy Pro Pod can be found in the show notes in the episode description in your app and at thecreativeimposter.com/118. This is also where you will find links for our fabulous creative imposter guest, including her show, The Offbeat Life, her free podcast launch masterclass at that super dreamy URL, howtocreateapodcast.com, and more resources for designing that location-independent lifestyle because, believe you me, one day we will be able to get the heck out of Dodge. If this episode with Debbie inspires you the way I suspect it will, you're going to want to hop over to Podcast Envy episode 76 and hear our extended podcasting-specific conversation. One last thing before we begin, if you have been loving The Creative Imposter, if it's helped you through this year in any way, if you've discovered someone you adore on one of the episodes, I would be oh so grateful if you could take just a moment and visit ratethispodcast.com/creative to leave a quick review. Podcast ratings and reviews will be super helpful for me in 2021 as I'm hoping to do more interviews on other amazing podcasts about the magic of podcasting in various niches. It's one of the forms of social proof that demonstrates that people, you, are listening to and loving the content that I'm creating. Think of it as a birthday present for me. My birthday is November 21st, so you are right on time. Okay, enough about me and you. Let me introduce you to the brilliant Debbie Arcangeles. I cannot choose which direction I want to go first because we could talk about travel, which we should do. We can talk about entrepreneurship and remote work, which we should definitely do. And we can talk about podcasting. But I'm curious for you right now in this moment, in the middle of quarantine, what is top of mind for you right now? What have you been thinking about the most lately?
I think for me, it hasn't really changed that much. The biggest thing that has changed for me is I can't travel for work anymore. But other than that, I work at home. I can work from anywhere. So it's still pretty much almost the same. I've actually had more time to focus on my business. So that's really what's been on top of my mind this whole time, all of these months that we have been quarantined, is just focusing more on the systems of my business.
When you say that you've been traveling for work and that you can't do that right now, what type of work is that is taking you around to different places?
So for me, it's really through my podcast. A lot of people hire me to travel all over the world to interview someone or add them onto one of my platforms, whether it's through my podcast or my website or speaking engagements. I try not to do it, which is really funny because when I started this business, I was like, yay, I really want to travel everywhere. And then I realized that when you're traveling for work, it's so much more different than traveling for leisure. And even when you're in these incredible locations, you're not usually there for yourself, right? You're there for the company. So they tell you what to do, when to do it. And it's not as you may seem, it's not the same. So I try not to do it. And I like to do traveling for myself now and just, work, travel.
Okay, this is so true. I remember during my full-time employment at the Lyric Opera of Chicago in the technical and production department, I used to fantasize about having a job that would allow/require me to travel for work. My boss, the technical director, would be going to all of these different locations with productions that other companies would rent from us. Sometimes California, sometimes the East Coast, sometimes Europe. And I would book all his travel and accommodations and do his expense reports. And I would dream of being able to travel with the shows or some other future job that would allow me to do this. But he always told me that it was not all it was cracked up to be. Like most of the time, you're on such a limited schedule. You have no control over your time. You have to go into work right away when you arrive, and there's no time to accommodate for jet lag or getting oriented. There's no time to sightsee. You're just getting whatever meal is most quickly provided to you. You're not having time to go out to restaurants. So Debbie's point about work and travel being separate is a good one for sure. Now, as a self-employed person who travels, used to travel, will travel again one day for podcasting conferences and to do work for clients in other areas of the world, I do have a little bit more control over how I do that travel. And I always make sure to book in extra time at the front or back end of that trip, even if it costs me a little extra money. Better if I can work it into my contract so that I can explore and enjoy those experiences. But enough about me and my travel for work dreams. We're going to get back to Debbie because she has a really incredible backstory. I think a lot of times, whether it's traveling for work or whether it's traveling for play, we think of travel as this like luxury or this high-end experience. But travel sometimes is also necessary. Travel is also sometimes about creating a better life for you and your family. And now here's Debbie's travel origin story.
So I actually immigrated to the United States from the Philippines when I was around 8 or 9. And my first look into travel really wasn't for leisure that I do now or even for work. It was really to just have a better life. And that was to immigrate. And even with my parents, my mom came here first when I was not even 2 years old. And it wasn't for leisure, it was for a better life. And she had to pretty much leave her whole entire family, me and my dad, just to be able to have a better life for all of us. And my dad was also in the Merchant Marines. So again, he traveled all over the world, like ridiculous. He's probably been to every continent in the world, but it wasn't for leisure. It was again for work. So that's really how I saw travel in the beginning. But my dad did love to see other countries, and he would show me pictures of even on the boat, on the ships, catching these huge fishes from like the middle of the ocean. And then he'd show me like pictures of Japan and all of these spots. So when I was 16, my parents are not well-to-do. All of my family are not well-to-do. They pretty much earned everything they could to and sacrificed so much. So they were not the type of people that was just like, we're going to just throw you a party for your birthday. So this was a big deal. I was turning 16 and they gave me a choice, right? So they were like, oh, we should throw you a party. And I was like, no, I'd rather go to France with my school because we had a school trip that year. So we fought a lot about it, but I got my way. And that was my first actual time to travel outside of just immigrating was to Paris. And that's where it all led from there, and saved up, worked 3 to 4 jobs in between school and kept traveling after that.
Oh my God. What is something that you remember? Okay, so also my first international trip was to France in high school when I was 16 with my school, with my teacher, my French teacher. And I have very specific, weird little memories of that trip, of small details that maybe don't seem that important, but they are like forever ingrained in my mind. Do you have any small details or anything that you specifically remember from that trip?
Definitely, it felt so different, right? Because first, like the language was so different. And I was really obsessed with the French language at that time. I was taking French in high school and I was like, I'm going to go to France and I'm going to actually use French. So that was really interesting. And I was into the arts. And so all of that, like some of my favorite painters were there. So those are the things that really stood out to me. And then seeing the Mona Lisa, which was super tiny. I thought it would be bigger. I think that's what everybody says.
Yeah.
I think for me, it was just the culture and the arts, the language, the food. The food there is incredible. And obviously my memories with my friends were really amazing for me.
Oh my God. The food in France, pain au chocolat, croissants, baguettes, real like crusty baguettes with the chewy center. Being in France was also before my vegetarian diet, so I remember actually learning how to eat steak that was prepared properly, not what they call bien cuit américain, which means well done American style, which basically means burnt, like no pink left inside, but learning how to actually eat a nice, juicy, reddish in the center steak. I even remember one time hanging out with this guy that we met in Paris who wanted to take us somewhere cool for lunch. And he said, oh, we're going to go to Macdo's. That's perfect. And we were like, cool. We didn't know what Macdo's was. And then we show up and it's freaking McDonald's. We did not know that the French people at that time were calling McDonald's Macdo's. And we were like, no, we do not want to eat here. We did not come from the United States to Paris, France to eat at McDonald's. Though I will say eating at McDonald's is a different experience in foreign countries. However, yeah, no. We made him take us somewhere else. Okay. When I had reached out to Debbie, much like other guests in this creative travel series, I asked Debbie to think of a specific travel experience that really changed the way that she thinks about her identity. And here's what she came up with.
Yeah, there's different things that really stand out to me, but one in particular was after college, I was a photojournalist and I traveled a lot and I was in the Middle East at this time. So it was just during maybe 2 months after the revolution in Egypt, and I was supposed to go into Palestine, but there were bombings and they wouldn't let anybody in. So I ended up going to Sinai in Egypt instead to meet up with one of the Bedouins there. And I had brought my fiance with me and he was like, "You're not traveling by yourself." So he went with me and we went to this little tiny village in Sinai. And I even forgot what it's called, but this was a long time ago. And we were pretty apprehensive at that time because obviously it was a really crazy time. So we went there and we were supposed to meet this Bedouin and there were no tourists. There's nobody there. And when we went to the village, we got there, it was like all men. There was no women. And then this guy comes up to us and then he introduces himself as his name was Muhammad, as our guide. And it was incredible because you have all of these preconceived notions about a place, especially during that time, especially in times of turmoil, like people are telling you, it's going to be crazy, it's going to be dangerous, and all of these things that you see on the news. And then we got there, and I can't tell you, probably 10 minutes after meeting him, we felt like we were at home. Like it was just so welcoming. And it was funny because we were watching the news and they were telling us that the place that we were at was so crazy. There was so much stuff happening and we were looking at each other like, there's nothing here. It's really quiet. Everyone's so welcoming. Like, yeah, so it was pretty interesting. And then we were invited into the mayor's house. We ended up having dinner with them. We met their like wives and the doctor was there. Like, it was crazy. It was a crazy experience. And I think it really brought to life that there's so much preconceived notions that we have with different cultures that we don't know about. And it's all of what we see in the news or what we read about. But when you're there really and seeing it for yourself, it changes your whole perspective on humanities and human beings in general. So that was one of the best trips that I've ever taken because of that moment.
Similarly, I had a friend who was in the Peace Corps in El Salvador, and she invited me to come visit. She had invited a few people to come visit, and most people were like, why would I go to El Salvador? Because same thing, all you know about, as an American, if you know anything about El Salvador, all you know is civil war, right? All you know is dangerous. And so people just thought that I was walking into a war zone and it was going to be awful. And I was alarmed when getting off the plane in San Salvador when the airport guards were holding semi-automatic machine guns. That was a weird sight. I was not used to that. I had not seen that before. And also armed security is like one of the top employment opportunities in El Salvador. So like you could go to a McDonald's and they have an armed guard at McDonald's. So those kinds of things are a little bit off-putting when you're not used to that. But I did not, for the most part, feel that like my life was in danger every moment that I was there. And I had a lot of really wonderful experiences. And it's kind of unfortunate because El Salvador has a lot of very beautiful spaces that you can be, and oceanfront. And I mean, we went to the most gorgeous, pristine beach and nobody was there. They had no tourism to speak of.
Yeah, I actually learned how to surf in El Salvador.
Really?
Yeah, I was there during the last Mayan calendar, and I had friends that actually lived there and we visited them during that time. So I spent the last Mayan calendar in El Salvador, and yeah, we slept under the stars and there were like bonfires and people were celebrating and it was pretty nuts. But yeah, we learned how to surf in El Salvador and it's a pretty awesome place. There are dangerous spots there, especially in the city. But once you leave the city in El Salvador, it's incredible. It's an incredible country for sure.
Yeah. This is another myth that I think, well, not really myth, but another thing that I think comes up a lot being a woman who travels. Have you ever felt that being a woman traveler was an extra challenge or was problematic, or that you felt uncomfortable or unsafe specifically because of your gender?
Not usually, like 98% of the time. And that's because what I usually do is I try to respect the culture. Okay, so for me specifically, if I get darker, I could look like I'm Spanish. I could look like I'm Egyptian. And this is the truth because I have traveled to countries where they really thought I was from that country. If I go to Asia, I'm Asian. If I go to Latin America, I'm Latin American. If I go to certain places like in Egypt, they actually thought I was Egyptian. So it's very weird because my fiance is white. And sometimes I've never experienced this in Latin America. I mean, it's like, okay, this is a whole nother episode. But the few times that has happened to me was when I was in Egypt during that time. And I was just getting yelled at for no reason. I don't even remember what it was about. And I'm not just going to stay there and be quiet. I think I was somewhere looking at something and they just started yelling at me. And it was because they thought I was Egyptian. They started yelling and it was getting really confrontational. And it was from a man, an Egyptian man. And if my fiance didn't come back and started yelling back, they would not have stopped because they did stop after he came. In other instances, during that same time, they thought again I was Egyptian. And because I was holding his hand, they would let me hear it and him how it was really unacceptable for an Egyptian woman to be with a foreigner. And that also happens in Asia, by the way. I'm not just saying this happens in the Middle East. Yeah. And when I go to Asia, especially, I'm Filipino, they automatically think that I am with him because of his money, or I'm sometimes even like a hooker or something. So, wow. And then I get treated differently when I get darker and lighter. It's very interesting. Wow. But the thing with me is I don't let that bother me. I don't think that should stop you. I think it's an experience that you experience because every culture is different and I may not understand it fully or I may not agree with a lot of the things that they believe in, but I can respect what it is, right? And I'm not going to be there and judge them. And I think that's the most important thing that we can do as women. Especially if you're like me, people will think you could be a similar culture. Because for me, if I go to Egypt, there's no way I can wear shorts. There's no way I can wear crop tops. And I have seen foreigners like Europeans wear that and they don't get anything. Like you could probably wear that, Andre, and get away with it and they'll just look and say something, but I would get attacked. And I have seen that because I was there. So yeah. But I would say that don't let those are just like small instances and they don't happen very often. And yeah, I think it's usually 98% of the time. It's always a good way to like get to know a culture and stuff.
This brings up a very good point. Learning about a culture before you get there and honoring and respecting aspects of that culture that may be counter to our own. I cannot tell you. I mean, I also went to Egypt, and that is perhaps another story for another time, or maybe that's for right now. But I and my sister went on a cruise with my aunt and uncle, and it was one of those like package deals where everything is like planned in advance and you have very little control. And my sister and I, honestly, at that time, I was in my late 20s and she's 5 years younger than I am. And we were the youngest people on that package cruise. However, I was amazed to go to mosques and find groups of travelers and tourists, mostly American, but some other countries as well, wearing like bare shoulders and crop tops and shorts inside mosques. This is like so highly disrespectful for their culture and their religion. And I get it. It's a tourist thing. But seriously, it does not take that much to respectfully cover areas of your body. We even had brought head coverings with us just in case, even though it didn't really seem required at that time. But it is an opportunity not only just to be respectful, but to learn more about the culture that you are visiting and enrich and deepen your own experience and to try something that's outside perhaps of your own comfort zone. Honestly, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say it's really disrespectful not to do that research and honor those customs when you're traveling. And Debbie and I talked about it. She definitely agrees. Do your research, people. Learn about other cultures. Try some things out. And don't assume that you can just live your own lifestyle and your own customs and your own fashion sense and your own way of doing things when you are a guest in another country. So another thing I want to talk to you about, even though I'm sure that we could just swap travel stories for the rest of the time, and that would be really wonderful, is this whole business that you have created for yourself with the Offbeat Life and location independence. How and when did you know that that was something that you wanted to create?
So when I actually started my business, it wasn't, I didn't know this was going to be a business. I was still working in my 9 to 5, and it was what most people probably thought as like the American dream, right? Like I went to school for this. I got my master's degree. I was getting paid really well. I didn't even work a lot of hours. My job was amazing. Like the people I worked with were great. I could take off whenever I wanted. I made my own hours. Like it was crazy. But there was something in me that knew that it was really not what I wanted to do in the long run. And I can't even tell you, like, I had panic attacks every 4 months, right? So this is crazy. People are like, what are you complaining about? This is like a dream come true, you know? This was after I was a photojournalist, and I wanted to get back to being creative again because this job that I had back then, it wasn't anything creative. So I really wanted to get back to that. And also I talked to a lot of travelers that were remote workers and digital nomads. And that was one of the things that I wanted to do for myself as well. So at that time, I was also growing some following on social media, and people were telling me you should start a travel site. And it was really something that I didn't want to do. And I was more interested in talking to people. And that's when my fiance was like, you should start a podcast. You should totally do that. So that's what was one of the things that I really loved about photographing as a photojournalist, because I talked to a lot of people. And that's when it all started. It was just out of curiosity to ask questions to people who knew what it was like to be digital nomad and remote workers. And then within 6 months, I got brands just coming to me and be like, hey, how can we pay you to get on your podcast? And I was like, what? You can get paid from this? And that's where it all started. And within 8 months, I made my first 5-figure month from my podcast. And a year and a half later, I was able to leave my 9 to 5 and do this full time. So it started out as a way for me to get information out of curiosity and hoping that I could help people too. If I had these questions, maybe other people had them too. And it just kind of snowballed from there. So one of the biggest brands that I've worked with was Johnson & Johnson. It was kind of crazy because they reached out to me. And it was one of those surreal moments that, you know, they were like, we're going to put you up in this hotel and you're going to go to this concert and you're just going to like do all these things and meet like celebrities. And then one day I was just looking around my hotel and I was like, is this even real life? This is nuts. How did I get here? I'm like, just a year ago, I was in my job that I didn't like, and now I'm here hosted by Johnson & Johnson. So it was pretty crazy.
Yeah. And if that sounds too good to be true, you can get the full scoop of how Debbie leveraged PR opportunities and her mad negotiating skills to find success with her podcast over on Podcast Envy, episode 76. But there's always more than one side to any success story. And so I asked Debbie what has been most challenging for her along the way.
I'm trying really hard to have this balance now. And I think I've learned a lot since the almost 2.5 years, or almost 3 years actually, since I've started this. But really the balance in the beginning, it was ridiculous. So when I was still working my 9 to 5, I was working like 7 or 8 hours a day. And then I would come home and work another 6 to 8 hours, sometimes 10. It was really crazy. And I'm not even saying I was working like 20 hours a day between my day job and this. But it was something that I was really passionate about. But I do have to say that I didn't realize how much effect that it would have on me, not just because I was so exhausted. It also took a toll on my personal relationships because there was really no time for anything else. And at that time, my relationship with my fiance like broke. We actually broke up for like a year because of everything that was happening. And it was interesting because during that time, that moment when I had that sponsorship with Johnson and Johnson was at like one of the peak of my career, like the start, right? And during that time was when we were apart. And during that time was when I looked around and said, wow, this is incredible. How did I get here? And then at the same moment, I was saying to myself, what the hell? Like, this stuff doesn't make you happy if everything else is not good. Yeah. Yes, you can have all this money, you can have all of this stuff in your career, but if you have no one to share it with, if you don't have relationships with like your friends and family and, you know, your personal relationships, it just doesn't amount to much. So I've really learned to balance everything and understand that there's time for work and there's time for play, because especially when you're doing something that you're super passionate about, it can be really easy to forget everything else. And that was a hard lesson for me to learn throughout the whole thing.
Are there any specific things that you changed that you can pinpoint that helped you to create those boundaries between work time and social time?
I hired people.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I learned that I'm not superwoman. Like, it's okay because, you know, especially if you're a type A person, you want to do everything. It has to be perfect. And I realized that it doesn't have to be. Like, obviously, it's not going to be done the way you do it, but it's not going to fall apart. So I really learned how to master that and have that different type of mindset. And now I have 5 people working for me and everything is running smoothly and I'm not constantly exhausted. And I just, thank goodness, like that's one of the things I think as entrepreneurs, we really have to learn is to learn when to ask for help.
This is key. So many of us creative entrepreneurs want to do everything ourselves or feel like we will have to do everything ourselves or feel like no one is ever going to do it better than we are or feel like there's no way we're ever going to be able to pay somebody to do a thing. I know that was my big thing when I started my first business. And it has taken me some time to get comfortable with the idea of bringing on other freelancers to work with me in my business and empowering them to do an even better job doing what it is that they do than I could do. And it frees me up to do more of the creative, more of the consulting, more of the strategy. But yes, asking for help, bringing on team members, and doing it in a smart, strategic way is so important when it comes to building a sustainable business for yourself. Another thing that I noticed is that you have this really cool website, howtocreateapodcast.com.
Yeah.
When did you decide that you wanted to start helping other people to create their own shows?
It was when people kept asking me the same questions over and over again. And I kept emailing them, answering them. Like I would get DMs, emails, like, you know, just questions every time somebody met me. Like, how do you start a podcast? I'm like, oh my goodness. Okay, well, I should probably just create a separate website from this. And it actually started January of 2020. So it's fairly new. And we get a lot of like pretty decent traffic going there. And it's only been like a few months. So it's really just understanding people's pain points and problems. And that's what I've been getting a lot aside from like how to work remotely. So I knew that it was something that I had to get into because it was being asked.
Wow.
So yeah, people are really interested in podcasting. So I was like, here you go. Here's all the resources.
Well, I think to your point about pain points, this time right now, people are feeling stuck, whether that's physically stuck at home and not being able to be out and about, or whether that's professionally stuck because the face of jobs and work and career, like a lot of that has changed and is changing. And so wondering, what do I do moving forward? And I think that podcasting is one of those natural solutions that we can think of because it's a field that's growing, because it's something you can totally do from home. It gives you a way to connect with people. Like there's so many good things about it for right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can do it from anywhere. You don't need to gallivant around doing it. So, and we all love to hear our own voices. So it's a good platform to have.
Do we all love to hear the sound of our own voice? I mean, I obviously definitely think podcasting is an amazing platform to have as part of your brand, as part of your platform, as part of your business, as part of your organization. But if there is something that is holding you back about feeling all impostery about the sound of your voice or about your message or about what you have to say or about whether you actually could have a show of your own, I strongly encourage you to head over to Podcast NB episode 76 and hear what Debbie has to say about that. In the meantime, I asked Debbie to look into her crystal ball as a travel professional, as a podcasting professional, as a creative entrepreneur, and give me what she thinks about the future of travel. Like, where are we going? Do we have hope? Is the outlook looking dismal? What does she think is going to happen next for travel if and when we can get to the other side of this whole coronavirus pandemic?
It's kind of an interesting place that we have right now, right? I mean, just talking about passports, for example, like the United States passport used to be like one of the strongest in the world. And now we can't even visit like how many countries? I think it's like over 30. So I was talking to one of my friends who's a travel blogger, and she's Filipino, and she still uses her Filipino passport, and it's actually stronger than the American passport right now. And it used to be like one of the lowest. So it just shows you how interesting it is as an American traveler right now. But I do have to say, I think it's going to be looking up, hopefully by next year. I think it's just, especially if you're in this industry and it's a business, you have to learn with anything that you have to be more aware and learn how to pivot and change. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do those bonus episodes with the people that I have interviewed before, because one of the things that I always seem to find with people who are entrepreneurial with their mindset is that they always pivot and they know how to change things around, and whatever happens, you always find an opportunity in something. You can obviously wallow in self-pity. I mean, we can all do that, right? But what happens afterwards? And I always find that it's the people that learn from what's happening, either from their failures or mistakes or things like this that we can't control, that really shows who are people who are going to keep being successful even when things are not looking up, right? And I love sharing those types of stories. And with the travel, I think it's, we're just going to be able to travel around the US. I think the US has a lot of beautiful spots. And then after that, things are going to start opening up. So I think it's a first world problem right now that we're having, but I'm not worried about it. I think it's going to keep going up. But if you're in the travel industry, I know how hard they're obviously hit, and it's very unfortunate, but I do think it's going to look up, hopefully in the next year or so.
Do you have any specific advice for someone who, and this is conversations that I've been having recently, my original thought was, I can't travel right now. And people who are saying, well, actually you can, but you just have to think about it in a different way or take different precautions or, like you said, focus more on domestic travel. Do you have any tips or advice for somebody who is really looking for a way to get the heck out of their house?
Yeah. I mean, even just your own state, you can travel around. I think we often overlook what's in our backyards. Like, it's ridiculous how many places that you can see, even if you just drive a few hours out and really appreciate what you have. I think this is a time for appreciation right now. And again, take the precautions, know what you're doing. Obviously, don't put yourself and other people in a spot where you're going to get each other sick or something. So just be aware of that and be safe, be a safe traveler. But other than that, I think that start with your own state, your own backyard. Who knows what you can discover? I mean, we're here in Florida right now and we're visiting like springs, and we saw manatee yesterday, like just an hour and a half from us. Like, it's incredible. We have a house here in Florida and we've never been there until right now. So there's so many things that you can overlook if you're so focused on overseas travel, that you should figure out what's near you.
Is there anything else that you would like to share with listeners of The Creative Imposter that we didn't get a chance to talk about or that is just coming to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really fun, right? To even say to yourself, like when you see someone like me who is doing something creative and they're creating income from it, like, oh my God, I can't do something like that. Or, she already has all these followings or whatever it is that you're thinking in your head. It's always those fears and mindsets that's your biggest roadblock. And I thought the same thing when I first started. And if I listened to myself and any naysayers out there, I still would probably be at my day job doing something that I really didn't want to do with my life. So I would say take one step every single day, do something, even if you're not motivated. Because honestly, to tell you the truth, not many of us are motivated right now, but you just have to go on with your life if it's really what you want to do. So if it's really something that you want, just do it.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Don't let this beast of a year get you down. Don't look at Debbie's Instagram. Well, do follow Debbie's Instagram, but don't get jealous of her Offbeat Life dream come true. Design your own. Put the plan in motion. Surround yourself with the best possible people and resources. Go subscribe to the Offbeat Life podcast. Listen to our podcasting conversation on Podcast Envy. Take her podcast launch masterclass. Join the Creative Imposter Collective on Mighty Networks. And if you've been podcasting already, apply for the Podcast Envy Pro Pod. It's all here for you. All you need to do is take one step. Thank you so much to Debbie Arcangeles for your time, energy, stories, and encouragement. Thank you to Edwin Ruiz for our audio mix, to Jovia Armstrong for our music, to Lisa Witter for our show notes. And I thank you, yes, you, for listening and helping me get through this year. Next episode, we are talking with traveler, musician, DJ, sound healer Shannon Harris for our final episode in this Creative Traveler series. This week, I will say it again. I am wishing you all the momentum you will need to take that first step toward creating your own dream life come true.